What did these ancient ships look like? We have several depictions of them. Here is one from the 5th century from Ajanta. It's a painting from cave number 2. Please look at it carefully because this is one of the main ships on which we have based the ship that we are trying to build. You can see it has got 3 main masts, that has a 4-sail mast as well. If you can see on the extreme right, where there's a person, one of the merchants standing, you can also see these vats of water. So they had to carry water with them, and you can see that as well. Also notice that it doesn't have a rudder. It has a trailing oar. So a trailing oar was used for as a rudder. It didn't have the rudder that we are usually used to. Now, this technique of stitching sort of survives in a tiny number of communities, but it's very rapidly disappearing because we are all moving into modern ships, fiberglass, etc., even for small ships. But you can see on the top right-hand corner some of the stitching technique as it looks in real life. So since we were talking about stitching, this is what the stitching technique looks like. And this is the kinds of boats that have survived in the Karnataka coast, but you get it on both coasts. For many generations, we haven't built a large ship using this technique. So we don't know, of course, we're still building these small ships, but what would it be to build a large ship using a Indian stitch ship technique? And we are specifically trying to attempt to build a ship from the 4th, 5th century, the Gupta period. So that, so as I said, this technique was used over very long periods of time. So we are being specific about the particular period from which we are trying to build a ship. Obviously, it will revive the cultural memories of India's glorious maritime history. It will also allow us to understand the use of monsoons and equatorial currents for how ancient interactions across the Indian Ocean worked. Obviously, today we use motorized ships, so very often we don't pay too much attention to the winds and to the currents. But it would be an important thing to note that both the currents and the winds were absolutely critical to understanding Indian history, both in terms of trade, but also in terms of flow of Indian culture, technologies, also geopolitical rivalries of the past. Obviously, we want to do this to inculcate a sense of pride in Indian maritime heritage. And then, importantly, we want to use this ship to undertake a voyage using some of these ancient routes. Now, we are not the only country that has attempted to build stitch ships. The Omani have been very much involved in trying to use this technology. Their own ships used to be stitched. Importantly, the Arabs, during the height of the Arab dominance of the Indian Ocean, they used to use stitch ship, but most of these stitch ships were interestingly built in India. Because remember, they don't have the lumber. So they don't have the timber, so they had to build these ships on our side. And in fact, some of these ships, the most recent of which they're building, the Jewel of Muscat, was also built by Indian shipwrights. It was built in Oman, but by Indian shipbuilders led by a gentleman called Babu Sankaran, who will also be helping us build our ship. He's from Kerala, from the Bepur area, and his team will be also helping us build the ship. But there were earlier attempts, the Sohar, the Egyptus. There's a more recent one, Al-Hariri, although that is not being sailed, that is more for museum. But the reason I'm showing you this is so that you know that other countries have celebrated their maritime techniques, but it's the first time that we in India are going to do this. What is used for stitching it together? It is coir ropes. This is what is used for stitching it together. It's slightly different from the ones that you may buy in the market. It's stronger, thicker, and higher quality, but it's still basically coir rope. Then there was coconut fiber, which is also coir basically, to do the fillers between the joints. Because remember, what we are doing is, since we are not nailing it together to the frame, but building the hull first, so there are all these joints that are being stitched, there are gaps, they have to be filled out. Obviously, you need needles. And then there is the Kudrus resin. This is absolutely critical because this is the resin, and we have some examples of it on the picture. You have the resin, the natural form of the resin. And this is absolutely critical, because once it has been put together as gum and put into the gaps, etc., it then hardens so that these gaps and holes and other things that are created as part of the shipbuilding get filled out. So this is the natural gum that is used between the joints and for the holes. Then there is fish oil and limestone powder that are used on the outside in order to improve the durability of the wood and to again give it some durability. And then there is red brick pigment, which is used for the external hull. It also improves durability. So this is the materials used for doing this. So what is the first step in building this? The first step is essentially building the keel. And just 2 months ago, we laid the keel of the new ship that we are building in Hodi, which is in Devar Island in Goa, where where the first step is being done. And the keel is ideally sourced from a single piece of timber. But obviously, if it's a very large ship, you may need 2 or even more of them. And that's the first step. And then what happens is that the planks are taken and they are put in these chambers for steaming. So why are you steam? Basically, it loosens out the fibers of the wood so that it can be shaped and slightly curved for the purposes of building the hull. And then once they have been steamed in these chambers, they are removed and then they are shaped. And once they have to be done very quickly before they go back, they lose the looseness. But repeatedly, you have to not just do it once, repeatedly you have to do it till the correct shape is achieved. And again, it's shown here how that works. Then the outer shell, the hull is created. So you have pairs of holes are drilled along the 2 planks, as you can see on the very first picture. And then coconut fiber is laid and wadded. So this is very important that there is a wadding. It's not just the stitching, but there is a wadding that is put using coconut fiber that's laid over the joints of the planks, which is then layered with coconut rope. So this is an important part of the process of doing it. One important thing that I would like to also mention here, that there were other cultures who also did stitch ships. So for example, the Indonesians also had a stitch ship technique. If you go to Indonesia and go to Borobudur, you will see one of them depicted in Borobudur. And in their technique, along the edges of the planks, they would also put these small holes and put pegs. They would put it together. If you have ever done IKEA furniture, then you will know how that works. Now that is another way of doing it. So they also stitched it, but it was not the stitching, but the pegs that provided most of the structure. But for some reason, we preferred it this way. Then you have the stitching is done. Now, for doing this, one important thing to remember is that the stitching is not just back and forth. It is done in this III pattern, which if you look at the extreme right, you can see, how that III pattern of stitching is done. And then the Kudrus resin is being applied along between the planks to give the waterproofing. It's also done all along between the holes and so on. And then, after having built the outer shell, that's when the frame is put in. So this is, as I said, completely different from how you may think modern ships are built. You first build a frame and then put the shell. Here the shell is built and then the frame is fitted in retrospectively. Again, the stem post and the stern post are also put at both ends and are stitched to the keel. And then the horizontal cross beams are also stitched together. So that's basically what gives it some degree of shape and stability. Then, of course, not surprisingly, given that you have stuck so many holes in the outer shell, you have to waterproof it. And so the stitching and the holes are filled with plugs. Putty is applied. Again, the Kudrus gum is used extensively. And then the coating of the fish oil inside and outside of the hull is also used. Now, since I intend to sail this ship, I'm rather concerned about the smell that is likely to come from this fish oil that's applied everywhere. Just like many other countries celebrate their maritime history by building and reconstructing ancient ships. For example, the Scandinavians have repeatedly built Viking ships. Other Europeans have built ships from their period of, maritime expansion. The Omanis, as you saw, are doing so. So, I thought, we Indians should also do it, given our amazing history, one of possibly the longest history of any country of maritime activity. So, it's an idea that I put forward to the Honorable Prime Minister and to Culture Ministry, and they were very supportive. So, with the funding of the Culture Ministry, we now have a project where the Ministry of Defense and the Indian Navy are basically going to oversee and then later on crew this building of this ship. It's being built, as I said, at Hodi Shipbuilders. It's a dock that they have in Diwar Island in Goa. And the team of Babu Sankaran is going to do this. As I said, they have already an experience of building the ship for Oman, so they should be able to help us with this. And of course, we will have the support of the Ministry of External Affairs for foreign cooperation when we do these voyages, and of the Ministry of Shipping for various regulatory approvals.